And this is where the fighting happens, because in my experience and in Seth's experience, sometimes one partner is a little more advanced in some ways. And it sounds crazy, but there's ultimatums that have to occur. If you don't figure out how to make money, this isn't going to work. If you don't work on this, blah, 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 if you don't work on this addiction, this isn't going to work for me. And many people don't want to have that difficult conversation because they don't want to rock the boat and they don't want to be alone. Hey everyone, it is Irene Lyon here, and thank you for clicking play on this video and watching. You will have just seen the tiniest bit from this long form interview where myself and my husband and colleague Seth Lyon, we sit down with one of our senior students, Magda, to talk about healing trauma and our nervous systems while in a romantic relationship. Seth and I have been together for about 15 years now. We got together in 2010, I believe, memory serves. And in this relationship, we've had to work on our own stuff, and we've had to work on our connection as a couple, our relationship in general. And with that comes a lot of work. I will be the first to admit that. And it is possible we've done a good job, I feel, being together for so long, working with our stuff. Now, what I want to say is that it is not essential for us to be in a romantic relationship to heal relational trauma. Now, of course, it's nice if we can have that, but it's not a prerequisite. And if anything, I might say that if you're not in a romantic relationship, this conversation might still be interesting for you, because we can start to work on our relationship traumas, our nervous systems, and relationship to relationship when we are single, when we are solo. I've done some posts about this in the past. The main premise is we want to heal the relationship with ourselves. So important. So I just wanted to add that little piece in there. Enjoy this conversation. I think it's a good one. And if you have any questions or comments or follow-up about this, please drop them in the comments below and my team will get back to you. Thanks for watching. Thanks to Magda for having us on her channel, and we will see you next time.
Hi, everyone, and hi, Irene and Seth.
Hey.
Hey.
Such a treat to have you both here. And it's actually been almost a year that we've recorded our individual interviews. So if someone wants to, they can go and have a look. With Seth, we talked about spirituality. And with Irene, we talked, among other things, about SBSM, so Smart Body, Smart Mind, your flagship course for deep nervous system regulation. And today we're going to talk about a pretty juicy and broad topic that I think is relevant to everyone, to every human being. And we're going to talk about nervous system regulation, or lack thereof, and how it informs and influences our relationships, with a specific focus on romantic relationships. Okay.
Sounds good.
Yeah. Okay. So let's dive right in. There are many relationship teachers, modalities, courses, therapies, and you don't know for any of those. So what would you say makes you competent to talk about relationships?
Well, I'll start with a parallel, actually. So we don't have a parenting course, right? Like, so we've got Smart Body, Smart Mind and the courses, and yet we have heard from our SBSM members, and Magda, you know them from being in the SPT cohort, many mothers in there, that they will say that Smart Body, Smart Mind was the thing that actually taught them how to really parent and how to really find regulation and teach. And even for adults, if they have adult children, it changed their relationship with their adult children. We have some women who are pregnant now in one of our cohorts, and it's just so cool to see all of that. And yet we don't call what we're doing a parenting course, but I think that it comes back down to just this core root factuality, if you want to be so bold to say that our autonomic nervous system governs so much in our body, and it is part of what creates relationship. It's part of what creates that co-regulatory need for an infant to be with their little one. So when you get that autonomic regulation piece fairly good or as masterful as possible, parents will say, it's just easier. It doesn't mean you're not going to be tired and exhausted, but it just becomes easier. So I think with relationships, it's similar because part of our nervous system physiology, and we can get into this, is about social engagement and connection. And if we have got disruption, dysregulation in that autonomic nervous system for all the reasons that we know happen, it is going to be very difficult to find that clear connection with not only another person, but with ourselves. And so one could say that we're not teaching relationship, but we're teaching people how to be better humans. And when humans are better, they seek out healthier relationships and they get out of toxic ones. So that would be my first sort of starting point to that question. We're not marriage and family therapists, but similar to how people are like, I've gone to so many therapists to try to work with my mental problems and nothing helped until I got into the nervous system work. We could say that there's a parallel to relationships.
Totally. I mean, our work is about building relationship with ourselves first and foremost. And I think a lot of the struggles that people have in their relationships with others, they ultimately stem from the fact that the relationship with themselves is not good. There's lots of information that gets internalized when we are traumatized because those traumas typically happen in relationship, often with our primary caregivers. And so we're very informed about how to work with that. Adult romantic relationships are essentially reflections of our relationships with our parents. At least they end up being that way when stuff is unresolved, because that is your primary attachment person as an adult, is your romantic partner, right? So it's about that primary attachment figure and how we relate to them. And if we had wounds growing up with those figures, those will then get played out in relationships in adult life. So learning to address those wounds with those early figures, those caregivers, is a fundamental part of changing how we relate to others as an adult, particularly romantic partners.
Yeah, and another layer, I guess, is the fact that you're not only talking about it as practitioners who've seen changes in their clients' lives, but you are also a couple, and
Yeah.
you're married for.
Oh yeah, we've been through many of the things.
You want some stories?
Okay, let's get them going. What are the things that you would like to share? And maybe, not in the sense of like digging out your dirt or anything,
Yeah.
or in the context of when you met. Irene had already done one of her trainings in somatic experiencing. And you, Seth, have done a lot of spiritual work and a lot of other types of shamanic work and some emotional work. And then you come together, and what happens? And how does that change over the course of your relationship as you also grow and find more of your own individual regulation, which I can only assume grows the capacity and the regulation of the container of your relationship?
Yeah.
There's a lot there. Do you want to start with?
Sure. Yeah, when Irene met me, I was living in the woods at this little hot springs resort that was totally off grid in the Willamette National Forest in Oregon. And I had been there for about 4 years straight. I lived there for about 7 years on and off throughout my life. And so I basically thought that's where I was just going to be, because it was a container I had made for myself that was very safe. And because as you say, I had done all sorts of spiritual work, emotional work. I was really good and relatively healthy and stable in the bubble I had made for myself, right? But it was a very controlled experience. So I hadn't done any actual trauma work. I didn't have real regulation. I had to create this external sort of bubble that helped create sort of a false regulation or a false sense of regulation, all of which I learned later, right? So I would say at the beginning stages of our relationship, in many ways, Irene was way more regulated and informed than I was. And that definitely formed the crux of early challenges, conflicts, ways in which I would react just to being like in the world, like the classic story is the parking meter at
Oh
kids.
my God.
I've
You
heard
know
you
this
mention
story?
it, but I haven't heard the story. So
Oh, you got to tell the story.
Yeah. So this is in the early days when we were looking for a home in Kits
Vancouver.
in Vancouver, and we went to this park where very close to where we ended up getting a house, and we were just going to go for a walk, but we had to pay for parking, and it was like $1, to pay for parking, and I lost it. I was outrageous, the man is trying to crush my soul, Babylon, down with Babylon, So, and that was all from my trauma, reactivity, right, to authority. And I mean, it's not that big a deal to pay $1 for parking, but it really like spiked into my system.
Quite
And
cheap, actually, in Vancouver.
yeah, quite cheap for Vancouver. Yeah, yeah. And so that's just a perfect example of how just an everyday thing, in the world would send like a spike through my system. And then Irene's like, what's going on? We're just paying for parking, And there were many things like that, around, right, work, money, having to be a professional, contribute, all these things, living in the city. So there was a lot of stuff early on where I had to sort of rise to the challenge. But then Irene had her own struggles and ways in which I sort of took care of her early on, right? I mean, if you want to speak to that at all.
Yeah, I mean, when I met Seth at that hot springs, I had just, like, for the story arc, I had just come back from finishing my SE training. I had just done a masterclass with Peter Levine where I was a demo for surgical and anesthesia trauma. Little did I know how much was still stored in my system. I had no effing clue, no clue how much I had stored and how functionally frozen I was. And that drive up the Pacific Northwest coast from California back to British Columbia, I literally, like, and I'm not exaggerating, I watched my skin just explode in rashes. And I was freaked out. I'm like, what is going on? And so I stayed at the hot springs where Seth was working, and we didn't have anything romantic happen then, but we started talking, and I definitely, we had there was a spark. And I kept going. I got his contact, and long story short, we connected, and that was that, a month later.
Yeah.
But that saying, when you do wedding vows, in sickness and in health, we always joke that our first really 5 years was me in sickness, because by the worst, Seth had to be in the home with me, listening to me screaming and crying because I was in so much pain, just showering. And like, I was just oozing with skin burns, and we couldn't sleep in the same bed. I was uncomfortable. There was no way I was going to be interested in having any intimacy because I couldn't even touch my own skin.
Yeah.
So that was a lot on Seth. He was literally my care provider. He cooked, he cleaned, he did everything. Thankfully, we had financial resource where I didn't have to work full time, because it wouldn't have been possible. And that was sort of our beginning. And then once I started to settle a bit and he was less in survival mode caring for me, I think that is, and I don't have dates, but that's when your stuff started to bubble up more.
Absolutely.
And, the piece about the money and making money and having to work, I would say that for the most part, it's been one-sided, where I've really had to push Seth. And this is where I think a lot of couples don't know how to do this. And this is where the fighting happens, because in my experience and in Seth's experience, sometimes one partner is a little more advanced in some ways. And it sounds crazy, but there's ultimatums that have to occur. If you don't figure out how to make money, this isn't going to work. If you don't work on this, blah, 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 if you don't work on this addiction, this isn't going to work for me. And many people don't want to have that difficult conversation because they don't want to rock the boat and they don't want to be alone. And for whatever reason, I wasn't afraid of being alone. I was just like, I can't live in this. And it wasn't toxic because Seth was never abusive in that way. But I had already been in another marriage that, again, wasn't abusive, but wasn't matched. And I'm like, I'm never doing that again. So while I didn't have the display of perfect relationship growing up, my parents also were not abusive to each other, like that kind of thing. They always kind of figured it out and woke up the next day and went to work, and they were never mean to me together. So I just kind of knew, yeah, I'm not doing that. And so Seth had a lot of stuff he had to own up to, and it came with a little bit of a screw you. I don't want to do that, but eventually it comes back to, do I want to maintain this relationship? And if the answer is yes, then you got to dig deep into your
Yeah.
own wounds. And it's usually, Magda, one person has more of that to do than the other, from my experience.
Or you take turns,
Or exactly.
which is what happened with us, really. I
Right.
mean, because I mean, another important point is when you get into this type of situation where like one person is challenging the other in a way that is gonna make the whole relationship ultimately work, it's still that has to be in alignment with what the person being challenged wants to work on.
Right.
Right? Like if Irene was presenting me all these challenges and I really was like, no, I don't really want to do that. Then you get into the situation where it's like the fixer up partner, right? And you're trying to fix them and they don't really want to. And that's toxic. However, the ways in which I wanted to evolve and change and grow were absolutely in alignment with what Irene was seeing in terms of how, you know, her perception of what needed to change and evolve in me. And I knew that. Right. So that's why I was totally open and like, okay. I mean, not like she said, there was pushback and
Not
like
that easy.
friction. It wasn't just like easy. I learned, you know, over time to follow instructions, you know, so it's like, but there's still like, even yesterday, you know, there still can be stuff that can come up. Like in the gym, Irene's, you know, an
Oh,
exercise
right.
physiology, you know, background, so she knows really good form. I'm still learning some of that stuff. I do regular weight training, but yeah, she can still like correct my form in the gym. And because of my, you know, history growing up just being pounded on with criticism, I can still have a little sort of flash of resistance, you know, but I doesn't, you know, I still listen and like like okay,
I'm
you
not
can
always
correct me.
kind. I mean,
Yeah.
I'm kind, but I'm like, you're gonna screw your back if you keep doing that. Like,
Yeah, yeah.
and then
Yeah.
what I'll do is I'll actually take a video,
Yeah.
because
Look,
you
see,
can,
you're doing this.
and it, you know, this actually comes back to something that we were talking about in SPT, this kinesthetic awareness. Like if someone doesn't have kinesthetic awareness of their skeleton in space, they really don't know that they're in a funny posture. And so for me, I see Seth lifting and I can hear his spine like crumbling on the inside as I see it. I'm like, stop. So even for me, like if I see it, I have to be like, okay. And then there comes a point where I'm like, I have to say something because I
Yeah,
can't bear him to be in this gym on his own, lifting more and more weight in that bad posture. But that's like a microcosm of other things that partners
yeah,
see. And I think it takes real courage. And as Seth said, like, do you want to be with this person? And do you know that they want to be with you? Then you have to take that, you have to be okay to be critiqued. And you know what? I'll share a story. As an old friend, not really in contact with her anymore, but she was gaining a lot of weight, like a lot of extra body fat. And I was like, this isn't good. And I lost touch with this group of people. And then years later, a friend within that group said, oh boy, there's trouble at their household because the husband basically said, I'm not attracted to you anymore. You've gained too much weight. And all the girls freaked the F out. How dare he? How dare he say that? And I'm like, I would want Seth to tell me if I was losing myself. Just like if he was, I would be like, hey, you got to take care of yourself. Right. And of course, I still love that person just like he loved me when I was covered in rashes. But it's like this element of when health is an important part of your life, these are the things that I think you do have to call out people on, especially if they're not aware of it.
yeah,
And it's not a hit against their soul. It's just like, hey, you know, just check in on these things. But if that person isn't comfortable in themselves, they're gonna be like, well, screw you. I can do whatever I want. I can eat as much as I want. I'm not gonna do these things. And that's where then you get into this contempt. It's like contempt.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
you sneer. It's like there's this sneering energy of like, oh, they're eating chips again, or da 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 da, and it's, I don't know, that's where that toxicity really lands. And it's hard to get out of that when both people cannot see in the same direction.
Yeah. And that really speaks to the need, at least at some level, for alignment in terms
Yeah.
of what are you here to do? Right? I mean, if there's a lot of unresolved wounds from the parents, then especially if it's in both people, but even if it's just one party, then you can get into this, lots of conflict whenever someone tries to give like critical feedback, like, hey, you really you should improve this. That can ping right into the person of their, dad calling them worthless, right? So it can be hard to hear. And sometimes, to be fair, the other person may be playing out their own stuff of like they have a need to like criticize because they were controlled, right? So if neither person is working on how they were wounded in their parental relationships, that's where you get all these fights and conflicts where you're essentially playing out dynamics. And that's called trauma bonding, right? Where each person is playing the role of some abusive figure in their past. And that can be really powerful if both people are on the same page and recognizing that, hey, we are activating this stuff in each other, and what a beautiful opportunity to move through it and to have support and also these triggers. So, I mean, maybe that would be a good thing to segue into, is that the concept of getting triggered and what to do, because that is a basic tenet of learning how to navigate these sticky places if we want to go through it. But before we go to that, I just wanted to add one more piece about this concept of being on the same page. When Irene and I met, there was a spark, that romantic little thing that says, ooh, right? And I'd say even stronger, there was a connection between our minds and our souls, and that we were both interested in the same thing, which was human development, improving consciousness, getting healthier, resolving trauma. We had come at it from different ways, but that's what we both were interested in terms of what are we doing here on this planet, right? So there was an alignment with what we cared about and what our purpose was. And that, I think, is the glue that can really carry a couple through these rocky, rough times, and what can give each other the internal fortitude to accept criticism, to accept feedback, to realize that you also want to improve because you're on the same page in terms of what you're doing. So
I think one of the key differences, though, is I didn't get into the SE work because I thought I had trauma to heal.
right.
Your story there. It was for my clients, right?
Yeah.
In my Feldenkrais practice. So, so Seth is correct now, but at that time, I was pretty standoffish around the deeper elements of personal work. I didn't think I had triggers, early trauma problems, none of it. Like because I was functional. So for me, my edge has been less about the stuff that Seth's had to work with around health and reaction. For me, it was more being okay in connection, because I was like, I got this. Like, I don't need anyone, because that was how I was raised, super hyper independent.
Yeah.
No siblings, no aunts, no uncles around me, very, and yet for somehow I still had secure attachment to a certain degree, but there was this lack of nuance. And so that was something that I had to cultivate. And it has shifted. So that is a bit of a difference. And so again, we like started in the same spot, but then we had to kind of go into different areas and zones of our own healing.
Yeah.
For, if I use the physical example, like for Seth, he had to get way more in shape, way more fit. And I actually had to kind of be a bit of a slob
Yeah.
and do the opposite, especially when
Which I was well schooled in, right? So we complemented each other really well in that way. is like, yeah, Irene's pushing me to get more fit. I'm pushing her to like, hey, don't work so much. Take it easy. You don't have to, go so hard every day, right?
And my skin stuff forced me to do that. Like
Yeah.
by the end of that 3 years, I had virtually no muscle mass on my body because I couldn't move. Right. And so it forced me to not do anything. And then as I built myself back up, like my body was completely different. Like all these things were different. It was like, oh my God, I can't push the same way I did in my 20s and 30s. And I'm still working on that. It's still frustrating, but I think I'm a lot better. It's like, okay, I'm actually pretty good and I have to just do way less. So that's kind of how we've piggybacked off of each other. Of course, each couple is going to have their own story. And I don't know, Magda, how people live in relationship when there isn't that common view going forward. But I do know it's just people think that relationships are meant to be petty and constant bickering because they don't know there's any other way. From
Yeah.
what the family, the drama of their family system is just normal.
Yeah, keeping secrets from each other,
Yes. Oh my
right?
God.
That's normalized. Not sharing intimacy on multiple levels. Being freaking nervous, not wanting to go to the bathroom in front of your partner, right? I wrote a whole article on that. Just like there's so many, yeah. There's so many ways in which dysfunction is normalized that people may not even think,
Yeah.
right? That, oh, this is problematic. There's maybe another way.
Yeah, so maybe going into normalized dysfunction, you had mentioned triggering and like
Yeah.
Mhm.
wanted to go into that because again, I think oftentimes we think that's just how relationships are. This is just what communication is.
Mhm.
And I think for many of us, yes, that is just what it is, but that's not what it has to be, or maybe even should be in an optimal situation, right? So I don't know if that was also part of your history. But yeah, how would you define triggering and like kind of
Mhm.
unpack it for us? And also, how might that change as we grow capacity and regulation?
Hmm. Do you want me to start that one off, or do you
I'll
want
start it off, then you might
to? Okay.
finish it because
Yeah.
I like the word activation. So activate, like I'm getting activated, which is more in alignment with nervous system physiology vernacular. Like my sympathetic system is getting activated to fight you, or I'm going to walk out the door and flee, or I'm going to just shut down and say everything's fine, even though I want to rage. Right. So how we are triggered, how we are activated is so nuanced, and it can look not high energy. As I said, it can be, I'm going to just shut down and get really quiet,
Hmm.
but I'm not going to tell you that I'm raging and all these things. And when you start to see these nuances in people, you go, wow, that person is really going into their freeze response and shutdown. But the thing is, and I don't know, maybe you can speak to this, Seth. I don't know how a couple would be able to figure this out if they are not actively learning about their autonomic nervous system.
No way.
I don't think it's possible. So I think this goes back to the question, we're not relationship experts, and yet Um, I've heard some pretty weird stories of like people going to therapy with a therapist and like nothing is going, like there's no work
Yeah.
being done at that autonomic level. They're just talking about the problems and it's like it is not going to go anywhere. And these are the couples that go to therapy every week for friggin' 20 years. Nothing is changing. So I don't know, is that safe to say that it's impossible to work on this stuff if you're not getting into the nervous system pieces, Seth?
I think so. I mean, I think there's a level of awareness you can have it around emotional intelligence without needing to understand the deeper
Sure.
physiological pieces. And that's maybe where the distinction between triggered and activated is, right?
Mm,
Triggered is a more clumsy term where it essentially means how I'm reacting emotionally right now is not about the present, it's about the past.
right.
Being activated into your survival physiology is a much more accurate and nuanced term that
Mm,
speaks to how useful it can be to have that self-knowledge, right? Because it's not really about the emotions. The emotions are being driven by the underlying nervous system state. So if you freeze, yeah, you'll probably get real small and feel very little, or maybe you go into a fawning response, or you just want to appease the person, right? Or you go into a fight response, you get really pissed, or you want to slam the door, run out, you want to scream at your person, like, oh, this is the sympathetic nervous system. So yeah, I think you can start being aware of it just at an emotional level, but it's really helpful to understand the more underlying physiological state, which is the nervous system state. It
And
helps
then,
you get perspective on it.
and then this goes back to because you asked that question about middle ground, Magda, this might be a good place for that. Because it's like, if one person is fully immersed in this knowledge and understanding, and the other person has not only no clue, but isn't interested, you're in a problem situation,
Yeah.
right?
Yep. There has to be, I think, if there is a middle ground, because the question was, I believe, like, what if there's one partner who's really into the nervous system work and another person who isn't? Well, like, what's the middle ground where they can be okay?
Yeah.
I think it can work if the person who's not doing the nervous system work is at least curious, interested in their partner's process, wants to hear about what they're moving through, is okay with hearing the sounds and expressions that may come out of them, the weird movements or like things that may happen as we're processing at the nervous system level. There has to be an openness to hold space, accept, be curious, and support. I think that's the only middle ground that could potentially work. I still don't know if that's 100% sustainable.
I don't think it is, personally.
Because
That's my
I think you're right, because it paints a picture that only one person really has work to do, and we simply know that's not the case. It's I don't know if you want to speak more about that, but
Well, I just think about there's a few things that come to mind. So I think about some clients who I worked with earlier on in my career when I was doing more Feldenkrais work. And so we're not even talking about trauma stuff, but this person really needed to improve their mobility. Like, they kept falling, they kept getting injured, a bit more older in age. And I couldn't figure out why she just wasn't getting better. And I'm like, okay, she's older. And then I found out, because I always gave her homework, right? I always gave her homework, and I was like, this is what you have to practice. And of course, neurosensory exercises I had for her to practice. Turned out that her husband would ridicule her when she would go onto the floor to do some of these Feldenkrais movements, and she just felt uncomfortable. And then she just stopped doing it. And so she would do her exercises when she went to their cabin in the woods, which was not every week. And I'm like, okay. And I actually didn't even, I was like, oh. And, we eventually stopped working together because it just kind of went like, oh, am I wasting my time? Like, of course I'm not wasting my time. And yet there's a part of me that's like, we've just wasted years and thousands of dollars from her side, because she couldn't integrate the work into her life. And then other stories I would hear, assisting at SE trainings. It always fascinated me when we were in our assistance meeting. And usually it's mostly women, because mostly women are the SE practitioners. And, there would be the odd guy that was there assisting. But you'd hear the colleagues of mine say, oh yeah, my husband's very supportive. He's good with me coming here and all this. But you could hear this undertone of like, there was a sadness in that. And I saw in my SE trainings, people get together, like that one token man that would be there would hook up and end up marrying another assistant, because in that relationship that they were both in, they weren't getting met at this nervous system level. And so of course you show up to these trainings and you're like, oh my God, I can like hang out and be weird and talk about nervous system physiology. And it's like almost like a drug when you don't get it at home. And then you go home and then you feel kind of deflated because you have to keep this part of you to yourself.
Mhm.
And I think this is, and this total speculation, but my sense is a lot of people keep going back to trainings and assisting because it's the one place that they can feel alive and with their tribe. And I'm like, I would want to live like that all the time. One could say it's lucky that Seth and I found each other, but I don't think it's luck. I think it had to happen. But I also see that in workshops. People come to workshops, we were just at one, and it's sad to leave because you had such an immersive experience. But the people who are extra sad, and I'm totally projecting this out, but my sense is the people who get extra sad know that they're going home to either roommates or partners or jobs where they can't be in this authentic quality that they were just in. And if that's you, if someone's listening to this, and like, it's important information to listen to, because as we know through the research, like when you can't be your authentic self, you are micromanaging parts of yourself and you're not fully whole. And some people can move through that, Victorian age couples where it's like, this is your partner and you have to marry this person, or arranged marriages, and they actually figure it out. But most of the time, people aren't happy.
Yeah.
So in this day and age, it's like we have the ability to find people. And I know it can be very difficult to find those people, but they do exist. And I do think that when you exude and work on yourself and you put that intention out there, that other person who can meet you and grow with you will show up. It just requires some patience. So I kind of went a little bit of a tangent there, but those are the things that I have seen in private practice, in trainings. I don't know how people can have meaningful relationships when both partners aren't at some level interested in doing some of this work.
I mean, you could have couples who neither one are interested in,
Oh yeah. That's a
right? I
totally
mean, there's
different
that.
situation.
That's a totally different thing, right? But like, yeah,
Yeah.
if one person is, it's pretty darn hard for it to be sustainable if the other person is not.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well,
I want to
it's kind
start.
of like, sorry, it's kind of like parenting. This kind of goes into relationships. It's like if you have two parents who are totally differing in how you discipline, if one parent's all about, engagement and connection and curiosity and not praising that child, and then you have the other parent who's all about praising and toxic discipline, like you are breeding this child, this human that is going to be so confused. It would be better to just have one or the other, even though one we know isn't the best, but at least that kid is going to come out with a little more certainty around certain things. And again, this comes back to, I mean, this is the preceding of that, is like, okay, when couples get together to procreate, are they on the same page? And this is never even a consideration typically. But I am seeing it more in my students and in people. They're like, I need to find someone who understands the importance of attachment and security and all these things.
Yeah. Yeah.
I cut
I
you off.
want. Oh no, yeah, it's okay. Before we move on, I just wanted to circle back to the trigger activation thing because we
Mm.
didn't address practical things, which I
Ah,
think would be important to share. So the most important thing when it comes to getting activated or triggered into the past, where your past stuff is coming up and you're no longer in the present moment, you learning to recognize that is so important for each partner, because once that happens, there's no point talking further. Because what happens is once one person or both are into their activation, it's not about what you were talking about anymore. It's about fighting and winning. So you got to recognize, oh, I'm activated right now. And then you need to say that, like, oh, I'm recognizing, I'm triggered, I'm activated right now. Let's give it a break. I need to just have some space. And again, both people have to be on board with that, because the other person could easily like, no, don't you walk away, right? And then like try to drag the person right back into the fight. So both people have to be on page with, at the very least, there's an agreement that once either person recognizes that they're no longer in the present moment and they're activated, it's time to pause and go away and have space, and we'll come back together later. So there has to be that at least on board.
So
And then there's the oh, sorry.
Sorry. And then how would we recognize if someone's not done any of this work yet and it might still be a bit abstract? Like, how do we recognize that we're actually in activation? What does that mean? How, if we're living in dysregulation and we're actually not in the present basically the whole time, how do we know we're even farther away from what is happening here and
And there's degrees, right? But essentially, if it's the fight side of things, then you would realize, oh my gosh, my voice is getting a lot louder. I'm starting to yell. I'm starting to maybe you're starting to say things that you were said to you by your mom or dad. That's a really common one where you find yourself repeating words to the person that were said to you. You may start to get really hot. You may start to feel incredible tension, like your blood is boiling, your forehead gets tense, maybe your chest gets tight. These are all signals that you're going into a fight-flight response. Or if it's the freezy thing, you might realize, wow, I'm starting to feel numb. I can't even take in what the person is saying. I'm starting to feel like I'm floating away or above myself. I'm starting to feel like I just want to get small and sort of collapse. I can't process what's happening. So these are all indicators. But again, if someone has no awareness of this work at all, they won't know that, and it'll be hard to even understand what's happening. But yeah, even if someone is living in dysregulation, the trigger, the activation is more of a spike in one direction or the other, that you can learn to recognize the physiological symptoms and also the behavioral patterns, like slamming the door, raising the voice, starting to get louder, that kind of stuff.
Thought patterns as well, because then we might tend to zoom in and kind of like, this person or this behavior is the cause for, everything that's happening or how I'm feeling or, whatever else. So, and I mentioned that because for me, sometimes if I'm activated and I'm not necessarily yet connected to that layer of sensations in my body, I'll oftentimes hear my thoughts and I'm like, oh, okay, I'm in fight flight. Because normally I would not be thinking about this person or this situation in a certain way. And suddenly, there's this whole narrative that completely shifts from, let's say, 2 days ago, even though there's nothing that really happened in the relationship that would warrant. And yet suddenly my whole thought pattern is completely different.
Yeah. This person's ruining my life. I got to get out of this relationship. If I would be so much happier if I was with so-and-so, etc. Right?
Yeah. I think too, I know you've mentioned this a bit before, Seth, when you start playing scenarios in your head and scripts in your mind about what you want to say, it's like you start almost arguing with yourself in your brain. And that again I think it's a protective mechanism. It's like, how do I figure this out? How can I figure this out? It's like, well, talk to the person, rather than, but then again, if you let's say you can't talk yet because you're so heated and you're heated, this is where having a little bit of baseline somatic awareness is so important, because it's like, these thoughts are on a runaway train and they're going to crash into the mountain and it's not going to go anywhere. And so how do you bring yourself back to those basics of nervous system health? But of course, if you're not aware that exists, this is where that mental chatter and then the explosions come in, or the stonewalling and I'm just not going to say anything and I'm going to go have an affair with someone that makes me feel good, right? Like it's like, this is how this stuff starts to trickle out. And then you have couples that end up just living separately, even though they're in the same place and they do their own thing. Like Seth and I do a lot of stuff on our own, even though we're in this house, but we're in connection in doing those things. We're not trying to avoid each other. We need our own space.
And then we need to be together.
And you also, so that touches into one thing I also wanted to ask you about, in terms of boundaries and relationships, especially for those of us who have codependency patterns and we might not really understand what healthy boundaries are. We might kind of break too much and be like stonewalling and suddenly disconnected. or we might not respect boundaries, or
Mhm.
there are so many things. And like, well, how can we bring a bit of nuance between being in alignment but also being individuals, and not needing to merge, or having that space where, yes, we're going in the same direction, but we might still have actually interests that we don't share, and that's not a threat to the relationship. That's not necessarily a sign of incompatibility. But then on the other side, if we are in that codependent pattern, it might be very difficult to see, oh, we're actually not in alignment. So talk a bit about that.
I mean, the answer is yes. What you just said is, but it is like everybody's going to be different. Because we've definitely worked on this. And by the way, like Seth and I have done a lot of couples counseling therapy. I want to make sure that we haven't figured this, like, just to be very transparent, we did not figure this out all on our own.
No, lots of
If
support,
if
somatic support.
anything,
Yeah.
yeah, if anything, I don't think, I mean, I'm going to wage a guess that if we hadn't had the good help we did have with a somatic experiencing psychotherapist who specializes in family systems, I don't think we would still be together.
Probably not. No, there were some tough chapters there. And that's something that's really important to mention. Yeah, that's people, you need support. Most couples will need support of some kind, but it has to be, yeah, effective, not just talking about the other person for an hour and, venting.
How shitty, how bad they are.
Yeah, yeah, totally. But yeah, the codependent piece, there's lots of variables, right? Like
Yeah.
there may be couples that naturally, in a healthy way, want to spend lots of time together. And there may be couples that, in a natural, healthy way, don't spend as much time together, right? So a lot comes down to personality and just your attachment style, what you learned. A lot of that can be informed by trauma as well, and you may not realize it, right? So a lot of these things, just our personality, who we think we are, a lot of that shifts as we get into this work. So we need to be open to things changing. I don't know if there is like a model of what is healthy in terms of time together and time apart. Right? I think it's variable, but I do think there probably needs to be a balance of both in any healthy relationship. That's just my hunch, because we need to be whole people on our own. If we start feeling like we need the other person to survive, that's a wound. That's coming from a place of wounding. I mean, if I lost Irene, I would be absolutely heartbroken and devastated, but I can see that I would be okay. I know Irene feels the same way. Like it would be
We talk
crushing.
about this and we
We,
talk
we
about
talk
this.
about it. Yeah,
Like, what would
absolutely.
you do if I wasn't here? Or if,
Yeah.
would you stay here? Would you go there? Like, just like I have, Seth hates this. I have no fear of death, right?
Mhm.
And it's like, yeah, take me now. I don't care, you know? And so that's a little bit of my fatalistic individuality. It's like, yeah, I've done enough. I've had a good life. I'm okay.
Yeah.
And there's something to be said about that. Like if you
Oh
can
yeah.
have that realization, you've done well and it's okay. And yes, there will be people who are sad, but eventually people go on. But like I'm thinking about, I travel a lot more than Seth does. And we are not the couple that are checking in constantly. However, if I'm extra tired, like there was a recent incident when I traveled where I was not in a good hotel room and I couldn't sleep. Um, and I'm like, something's wrong. And and I didn't share this with anybody, but I will now. I found out that I was being poisoned by jet fuel in my hotel room. So there was a crack in the window at the hotel room in Amsterdam. And I thought I was having some weird trauma response to being alone. And it
Mhm.
turned out on the third night when it got really bad, I'm like, something's not right in here. And turned out there was a defect in the windows, but they didn't know about this until the wind hit the window in a certain way. And because it's a big hotel, not everybody's in those rooms every night when there's a certain wind pattern. I'm like, you've got to be kidding me. Right. Because as soon as I ended up in Austria, I had no problem sleeping. But I was like, so I was in contact with Seth a lot more. I was reaching out to my SE colleagues. I'm like, I don't feel well, something's not right. And then it had nothing to do with my trauma. It had to do with like an external circumstance. But
Hmm.
the amount that I contacted Seth in those first 3 days was abnormal, because typically we won't even talk on the phone if I'm gone for 2 weeks. Like we might for a tiny bit, but it's very
Yeah.
rare.
Yeah.
Whereas I know there are certain couples where there will be like, where are you? You must be done. You must be done. Why aren't you calling me? Why aren't you picking up? And it's like, and that is a wound,
Yeah.
right? That's the little kid who's like, where my mom is late. My mom is late. Why isn't she here picking me up yet from swimming lessons? Oh my God, I'm panicking. For a little person, that's accurate.
Hmm.
But for an adult who's just traveled across the world to be somewhere and now they're like trying to reach and get their partner on the other side, that's an indication that there's some wounding that needs to be worked on.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Being secure in yourself while having a healthy attachment is an interesting thing to navigate,
Mhm.
right? Because when Irene goes away on one of her trips, yeah, it used to be that like I would just be convinced she was just gonna die. Like, and I would spend the first day just like
Mhm.
imagining all the scenarios, right? And like
Plane
that's
crashing.
plane crashing. Oh my gosh, what am I gonna do? Oh, I'll have to start imagining what would I, where am I gonna move, etc. Like, would start planning the whole life. It doesn't really happen anymore. But that is, one could say, part of being healthily attached is that level of just awareness of how much you care for the person.
Mhm.
That can so easily tap into
Flip.
and flip into this wound where it's like this neediness and like I gotta know that they're okay. I got it. Like if they, and then you get, then you land and you get the 20 texts and like, or you wake up and they're right. So it's can be a tricky needle to thread when we have attachment wounding, and also a healthy care and a healthy level of attachment, and knowing where one stops and the other begins can take some practice. And again, why it's so important to really learn about yourself, right? To learn to identify like, no, this isn't just healthy attachment. I'm going into a place of survival where I'm awfulizing unknown things and projecting out into the future. So having those awarenesses is pretty key. Yeah.
And just to add another, story piece to that, because of my functional freeze upbringing and being hyper independent, I would land somewhere and I would forget to tell Seth that I got there. And then he would start texting people who he knows I'm with. And
Yeah.
someone would be like, Irene, you got to text Seth. He needs to hear from you. I'm like, okay. And so, because it didn't even occur to me that somebody would be thinking about me.
Hmm.
Because
Yeah.
I was that kid that got left at the ice skating rink and people forgot to pick me up, and staff would come to pick me up and other parents would wait with me, and so that was my thing, right? So now like if it is a plane, like the moment they say you can now turn on your mobile devices, like I am on, I'm like, I'm here, and
Yeah.
it's it. Like I don't say, how are you? How was your morning? Like it's just, I'm landed, I'm good. I'll let you know when I get to blah blah blah.
Yeah.
Um, it isn't, it's so those like that shows a shift. Like, okay, now we're at another level where I am in consideration of the other person's feelings, whereas before I wouldn't even consider that.
Yeah. Yeah.
Um,
Which is a perfect example of how wounding plays into each other. Right?
mhm.
Like Irene is not even thinking about the fact that I might be concerned and wanting to know she's okay. I, on the other hand, are hyper concerned, worried, right? And then one will feed off the other. So, and then that's it, that's how it's shifted, right? And then that goes along with just the nature of our traumas, right? Where mine was much more overt and on the surface early on in our relationship, and Irene, because she had so much functional freeze, really, I would say it took me getting regulated for your system to feel safe enough for your stuff to come out. I mean,
Probably.
in terms of looking at the arc of our
Yeah.
relationship.
This is another one because I want to make sure that like I add in that there are moments where I have been freaked out that Seth has died.
Mhm.
So this is a great example of situational trauma and past history. So we stayed at an Airbnb years ago, in the country where I used to paraglide with my ex-husband.
No.
And because we sleep in different rooms. So I was in my room in the Airbnb and he was in his room, and I couldn't sleep and I didn't know what time it was because it was January, so it was super dark. And I literally thought, Magda, that Seth had like died in his sleep because he hadn't gotten up. And I'm like, and I never went to his room. I'm like, don't bother him. You know, he's fine. And then it's like, but what if he's dead? And it's because I flew in that valley so many times where I didn't realize I could die. I could die. Or did my husband die? Where did Alistair go? Like, because you would lose radio contact with people and they'd be like 50 kilometers down a ridge and they could be dead in the trees. And so all this survival stress that I had under my functional freeze umbrella came up when I was in this house with Seth in the exact same valley where I could point to the mountains I had flown off of. And it made no sense, but it did make sense. It made sense when you understood or when you understand old stuff popping up. So I'm in the same situation, area, I should say, but with someone safe. And, these are these little things that if you don't understand the trauma nervous system work, you might think you're going crazy. Of course, the person's not dead, right? So that just came into my mind because there have been moments as I'm not in that functional freeze where I get worried. So that does pop up.
Yeah, I think that also kind of speaks to the paradox of the work as we do it, I think, because yes, when we come together, for example, whether it's just with ourselves more or with a partner, and our woundings, our survivals are more on the surface because we have a bit less capacity. It can be like, stuff coming up all the time. Then the paradox is that the safer we feel with someone, the more stuff may also start coming out.
You gotcha.
Absolutely. Yep.
So just because stuff is coming out, as long as, again, there is a foundation of knowing we're both caring and loving and considerate and affectionate and we want the best for each other, as long as that's there, if there are actually a lot of intense things coming up in the relationship, that doesn't necessarily mean that it's a bad relationship, right?
Right. No, it can mean it's a good relationship. Right.
I think that can be such a mind-boggling thing to be able, again, to differentiate between, am I just in a vicious circle, not going anywhere and just like recycling all of those things, or is there actual growth happening while the drama cycles are also kind of unraveling?
Absolutely. Yeah. You want to see change. You want to see evolution over time. And that's one of the clearest signs. Like Irene was just talking about, she used to never give a shit, right? Or like you wouldn't even think about it. And now she actually has moments of feeling anxiety and worry about me, right? And that only happened because of the safety of the relationship, allowing her to get to that. And it could look like going backwards, but it's actually moving forwards and uncovering these layers. Absolutely.
There's a parallel too, if we think about child rearing and kids, like when a kid is safe, they will feel comfortable, I think about teenagers more so, in a healthy situation where that teenager is finding their independence and finding their autonomy. When a parent says, yeah, my kid just told me to fuck off, I'm like, great. As long as that kid isn't being violent and abusive, of course, or being reckless. But if like, right, I don't want to do that. Doesn't necessarily mean that, they shouldn't do that. But when they feel comfortable putting out that healthy aggression, that's actually a huge win. And this is also why, if we think about adoption trauma, that, when kids come into, a loving household, there's this, again, if those adoptive parents don't understand this, they will be like, I'm giving this child all the love in the world, all the food in the world, all the shelter in the world. Why are they having tantrums? Why are they having meltdowns? It's like, well, it's because of their stuff from being separated from their mothers and all the trauma that goes with adoption trauma. And so you see how this slices into so many different aspects of human relationship, that if you, again, it goes back to that earlier thesis, like, can people figure this stuff out if they don't have the nervous system element on board? I think because we're humans and we're not just mammals in a den with our cubs, and usually the father is gone, right? It's just the mother with her cubs. Like, we're dealing with a very different situation here.
Mhm.
And we're just figuring it out, like, just
Mhm.
in the
Mhm.
grand scheme of things.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So that reminds me of a second question that's
Mhm.
sent in. To kind of put it in a nutshell, if we've had, early developmental trauma, birth trauma, separation, and attachment ruptures continuously with our primary caregivers, and we never really established romantic relationships in early adulthood, and now we're in our, 30s, 40s. How do we even
Mhm.
approach or entertain this idea of trying to chart these waters?
Mm.
I mean, the simple answer is you just have to trust that we're actually meant to be in connection and in relationship. Um, I have met older SBSMers whom in their late, I think this person would have been in their late 50s, maybe even early 60s. She said to me, "Thanks to you, I've fallen in love at my age and I am now about to get married."
Mhm.
And she just wrote off relationships. And
Mhm.
so I think that's a great indication that we're actually meant to find that connection and intimacy. And when we get ourselves in good regulation, and it doesn't have to be perfect, but we send out a signal that opens that up. And yeah, I just think about that one woman. I met her at an up and down workshop in the UK, and it was just like, oh my, I think I cried because
Mhm.
she was like, I never thought I was gonna fall in love. Um,
Mhm.
and I remember her saying the thing that every day I would wake up in the morning and I would have violent diarrhea, and I think vomiting. And she's like, that has all changed. Like, I couldn't go out without, I think, soiling herself. Her autonomic nervous system was so dysregulated. So she gave me that piece. And oh, by the way, I've fallen in love and I'm getting married at like age 55 or 60. And I was like, great. So that, how do we make it simple? And how do we make it just, it's part of our DNA to be with a partner. I mean, it's biological. Even if we don't have children,
Mhm.
we might create something that's different in the world. It doesn't have to be a child, for example. And I mean,
Mhm.
Seth and I we're proof of that. Like, we made a conscious decision. Okay, this is not for us in this lifetime. We're birthing something else. And that's
Mhm.
enough. And this is actually something you will see. People will want to have children to fill a void.
Mhm.
Never do that, by the way. Like, if you go into a partnership and it's like, I need a baby to feel loved and to love something, it's like, that's disaster waiting to happen, in my opinion.
Mhm. Yeah.
Which I think happens all too much because of attachment wounds and all the
Mhm.
trauma. So I don't know if I answered that question, but that's just kind of my riff off of that a little bit.
Well, like you said, there's an element of trust, like, that has to be there, that like I can at least open to the idea that this is something that would be good, even though
Mhm.
I can't possibly imagine it. I'm going to trust that there is a wisdom in that connection, that ability to connect with another human that is possible somehow. And I'm gonna maybe put myself out there, but before you do any of that, I would say if someone had a lot of attachment wounding, a lot of trauma growing up, never did the high school thing, didn't date, never got in romantic relationships in college, and now they're in their 40s, well, it's gonna have to start with building relationship with yourself,
Mhm.
because you can't possibly attract a healthy relationship without first really doing some groundwork, getting to know yourself, and even what you might want. I mean, how would you even know right? So I think that would be the starting place, is learning how to cultivate deeper connection and relationship with your internal experience, which is what this work is all about on many levels, many different ways. And then it would probably be about learning how to take little risks in your casual relationships. Like maybe you start sharing more with an acquaintance that you do have. Like maybe there's a friend that you start talking more about your experiences with. You start maybe engaging more with just random people. Maybe you put yourself into uncomfortable situations that you wouldn't normally do. Like you go to a meetup group around a common shared interest, and yeah, it feels weird and uncomfortable, but you use the tools you've built by building relationship with yourself to stay present and to just sort of try to hold a sense of openness. And what's this all about? You work with what gets triggered in you from putting yourself out in that way, right? So I think that's really how you would build that. But there does, like Irene said, there has to be an underlying trust that like that's even possible, that it's even something that's good, right? That it's even something that could be wanted. So
I hear that a bit as an echo of what I hear you say a lot around healing, that we need to believe that we deserve to heal. And that kind of
totally. You need to
sounds
believe.
like a very similar thing. Like I need to believe that I deserve to be in a relationship, but I have to believe that it's possible and that it can be good and nourishing.
Yeah.
Yeah, and that boils down to, of course, those wounds, the toxic shame elements that we talk about in SBSM and in various videos. It's like if you are still carrying a lot of that wounding from childhood around just being worthless and not valued, and you gotta, I mean, people often say it's like, oh, it's impossible to do this healing work alone. You have to be in relationship. And the trouble with that statement is that's true if we all started in healthy relationship. So I want everyone to understand the macrocosm of how difficult this actually is. And of course, it's not impossible because, you know, we've seen lots of people who have healed and have found really good relationship. But I mean, just to go back to the biology aspect, like we were not treated equally as little humans. And then you throw in not only a partner who's in their own traumas, and there's no shame in that, but they're in that stuff. But then you throw in a different culture, a different religion, a different way of being brought up in society. And okay, these two people have totally fell in love and they're meant to be together. It's like, but then you have to navigate, what do you do at Christmas? Do you celebrate birthdays? Like what is Hanukkah? Huh? I don't understand this, you know, like what, you're not supposed to eat food on these days? It's like, I don't believe in any of that stuff. And so you see there's even this other layer of culture and tradition. And I have found, like Seth and I, we're like acultural in terms of like, we really prefer to not celebrate anything. And that is actually one piece when we met is like, oh my God, I found my person.
Yeah. What? You don't give a shit about Christmas? Yeah. Woo, what?
Every year we talk about how it would be nice to put Christmas lights up on our house because we drive through, we see all these beautiful lights. Have we ever done it? No. Because at the end of the day, we really don't care. And so you see, that can be the cause of so much fight in a relationship. We have to go to Christmas dinner at my mother's, and then this dinner is always at my blah, blah, blah. No, we can't go there because we have to go here. And now we are spending all our free time arguing about where we eat over the holidays. Like I mean, it sounds silly, but that is the amount of so much stress in couples and families. It's planning for the next birthday, planning for the next holiday. What are we going to do on spring break? Oh, that person can't come here because they don't get along with this person. And it's just a mess. And it's like, it's kind of a comedy of errors, but that's the other element in relationship is how do you navigate the other family systems that you each have?
Yeah, I think that speaks to a really important underlying principle about relationship in general, is that when you find your person, I think there can be value in recognizing that you're creating something new.
Mm.
You both have your various family histories, but how can you put the container of the relationship first? Because that can lead to a lot of mitigation of these things, of like the various systems we come along with, pulling at each person. It's like, well, what if we choose to put our relationship first and recognize that this is the thing that we are creating? And I think if you could have that common ground, that might make it easier, because you have this camaraderie. It's like, no, like our connection is more important than the demands that our family systems want to put on us, or the expectations or the traditions.
There was that
That's a
story. Sorry.
Oh, well, just that was one of the cool things we got from that one coach we worked with.
Mm.
She talked about the relationship is its own person, almost,
Mhm.
right? Like the relationship itself needs things that maybe neither person necessarily want individually. And
Yeah.
you have to make time for the relationship as its own being, kind of.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, I'm thinking of a story that Gabor Maté had. I think it was in The Body Says No, but don't quote me on that. It was someone who was he was like dying. And it turned out that he he was married. I can't remember if he had kids, but he was so attached to his mother that he would eat dinner with his mother and then would go home and have dinner with his wife.
Who
And he's
didn't
like, this
know
is
about
ridiculous.
who didn't know about the dinner with the mother? I
Yeah.
remember this as well. So he was like getting plumpier and everything, and
Yeah. And
yeah.
I just saw that play out in a Hollywood movie. I was actually on the plane coming back from Europe, Ferrari, the story of Enzo Ferrari. And he had a mistress and he had a child with another woman. And then he had his actual wife who built the Ferrari empire. And he would eat he had two dinners as well. And so he would only eat a little bit of the mistress's house. And then he would go back to his mansion and eat dinner with his real wife. And the real wife had no clue that he had a son in another marriage. Like, that's some bad Ferrari karma. No wonder why they're not doing well as a car company, right? It's like there's so much bad stuff in that, but it was just how it worked back in that day. And I have no doubt that it still happens in differing ways these days. But
Yeah.
yeah, I think that ability to be, I think you hit the nail on the head there, Seth. It's like you're creating your own microcosm. And so if you do have children, again, that is so important, because then you don't want those children in these tug of wars
Hmm.
between, where do you go for this and who gets this and who gets this present. And it's at the end of the day, I always look at the pets around us. I'm like, they have no idea what's going on. Like, they don't understand any of these holidays. They don't understand Christmas lights. They don't care if the turkey wasn't cooked this way. It's like they just want their food, they want connection, and they want to go for a walk. Right? It seems so simple, but it's like for Seth and I, it's a good week if we can have dinner every night together and we can go for one walk and we do our work separately, and we make sure that we have some time once a year at least where we're together for like a week.
Hmm.
Um, And the reason we know I think we're still in good relationship is like during those holiday times, we never get sick of each other.
Hmm.
We enjoy hanging out, breakfast, lunch, and dinner. Whereas when we're here, we don't do that in the same way.
Hmm.
You got to like the person. That was one
You gotta
advice.
like the person. Yeah.
Someone gave me the best relationship advice of my life. It was an older friend who's been married for a long, long time. She's still married to the same person. And I was in turmoil around my first marriage. And she looked at me, she goes, Irene, the question is, do you like him?
Would you be
And the
friends with him, right?
and the answer was no.
Yeah.
I don't hate him. I love him, but I don't like this. This doesn't feel right. And so that was like, that is always, my mic drop question for people when they're not sure. It's like, you got to like the person, because that lust and that desire is going to change. And you got to like them when it comes down to you guys being old and
Mhm.
dealing with that stuff as it happens. It's like, I like the person.
Yeah. Yeah, well, I could listen to you for hours, but
Oh,
our time is kind of coming to a close. There are also some questions about sexuality, but we've discussed that maybe that's not necessarily a topic for right now, maybe some future conversation.
Yeah, I mean, with sexuality, it's like there's many different layers involved with that. And I mean, there's trauma history and, excuse me, there's trauma history involved. There may be sexual wounding or just attachment wounding that can play into it. There's the hormones, like what's going on at the hormonal level, which is greatly influenced by survival physiology, what's happening in the neurochemistry. What are the preferences, what are the likes, what are the dislikes, how's the communication, can there be intimacy on all levels, right? Because you can't just have intimacy in the bedroom, you have to have intimacy as a holistic sense. So it really is its own conversation, I think, just sexuality, because it's such a big topic. But I think it's important, like if we're going to say something quickly about it, to you have to like the other person, because yeah, the those lovely pheromones that happen at the beginning, that all changes. Like once you are together for a while, you lose that, and that's just a reality. So it can't be about that
Lust.
That's not sustainable. It has to be about being in alignment, liking the other person, being able to communicate, being able to be intimate on many, many levels. Yeah.
My sense too is like we've talked about all these other elements. It's like I would like to believe that if people can work on these base level elements, their own wounds, being in relationship, looking forward together, differentiating each individual so they're their own person, but you still can come together. Like that for some couples could take 20 years to work on. Seth and I are still working on this stuff, right? And we live this work. So it's kind of like, it is a question that people want to, like, they want to know, like, what about sex? Da, 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 da. It's like, yeah, let's just start with like, can you stay in your body when your person triggers you? And that seems kind of simplistic, but it's the base of everything, this baseline nervous system piece. Dr. Moshe Feldenkrais, in one of his books, and he wrote a lot about sexual maturity, he postulated that sexual capacity in humans is I forget how he said it, but is like the last thing to develop. He said it. He's like, sexual maturity is the last thing that develops in humans, if you ever get there. So I think that might be why we kind of not avoid, but it's like it just doesn't seem as important when all these other factors have to get into place. If your partner pisses you off because they don't take the garbage out, you got bigger fish to fry, right? Like you got to work at those base levels. It's like, are you triggered that they don't put their socks in the washing machine? Like
Yeah. Are you fuming in rage, marshaling your mental arguments to say to them when they get home because you found their socks on the floor? Okay, yeah, there's some more important things to address there.
Yeah.
This has been fun.
Thank you. And I'm looking forward at some point to chapter 2.
Yes.
It's been a treat to have you both in one space, just to myself.
Thanks, Magda.
So thank you so much for your time. And yeah, see you next time.
Yeah.
Awesome.
Bye.
Bye.